the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Given the high-profile events of the past several years, it is clear that Americans need to have serious discussions about the meaning of race and racism in our individual and communal lives. If those discussions are going to mean anything, they cannot just be exchanges among people who already know each other and share common perspectives. Rather, they must reach across boundaries of race, age, religion, and economic status. Those kinds of discussions, where listening is more important than talking, are hard. It helps to have someone or something to mediate and prompt honest exchanges of ideas and feelings. 30 Americans, a current exhibit at the Cincinnati Art Museum, is perfect for the task. 30 Americans presents pieces in a variety of media created by the most influential African American artists of the last 30 years, reflecting a range of perspectives. The show focuses on the issues of race, gender, and identity in ways that provoke deep reactions. To discuss the 30 Americans exhibit, I am joined this morning by Rehema Barber, the director and chief curator of the Tarbell Arts Center at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, Illinois, and Brian Sholis, the curator of photography at the Cincinnati Art Museum. And the two of them co-curated the 30 Americans exhibit as it appears here in Cincinnati. Welcome to Cincinnati. Welcome to Newsmakers, both of you. This is great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
This is a powerful exhibit, and Leadership Cincinnati, which I ran until I retired a month ago, we use this as the centerpiece of our Arts Day because of the strength and the power of this exhibit. You know, the whole name even, I think, is interesting, and we sort of saw the signature piece, but there's another version of this. Why 30 Americans? But it's all African Americans. I think the instinct would be, 30 African American exhibits.
Right, because the African American experience is the American experience. I think, African American identity is not monolithic, and that's what this exhibition is about. This exhibition is not just about the African American experience, but the experience of people of African descent as they are Americans, which I think that people that aren't African American can also identify with, issues of identity or issues of commercialization and imagery and representation. So this is a show that doesn't just talk about the African American experience, but has African American perspectives, which are also American perspectives.
I want to take a look at the sign for a second too, because it too is a piece of art. Although people may just see it as, it's lit up on the wall.
Right.
Brian, as you look at that, what is it that you look at it from a curator or from an artist's point of view?
Sure. That's an artwork by a New York-based artist named Glenn Ligon. And for more than 20 years, he has been using texts, fragments of texts, and illustrating them in various ways. He makes paintings, he makes drawings, he makes sculptures. This is a neon sign made of white neon that you might find hanging in the window of a local bar or a local shop that he has covered with black paint. And it says America, but the light itself also blinks on and off. And it was made in 2008, a moment of great hope and also great concern in American society and in the African American community in particular. That year was when Barack Obama was on the path to the White House, and that was something that was, of course, greatly exciting. But at the same time, it was the moment of economic uncertainty,
right,
with the housing crisis and other
banking
issues,
crisis.
and banking crisis and job losses. And so I think that imperfect shining light that is covered possibly and not always able to sort of shine forth and radiate outward, signals something about that moment in particular.
One of the key images in this exhibit is entitled Sleep, and we have it, and we're not going to be able to do justice here.
Right.
It's huge,
right,
and it's in that entrance gallery, which thank goodness it's there, and we've brightened that gallery up. I've been banging on people for years that I hated the old gallery, but anyway, that's my thing. When you look at this, what do you see?
Well, I mean, I see a lot of things. I see this work is done by Kehinde Wiley. He is a New York-based artist, and he uses classical historical paintings and reinterprets them. And his work looks at issues of representation, specifically the representation of Black males. And you see the Black male body in a way that I think is not confrontational, but really just present and awe-inspiring. And there's a juxtaposition with the original painting, which is in the Cleveland Art Museum's collection. It's by an 18th century French painter. And you see this moment in this painting where the gentleman is in a complete state of it's relaxed and not confrontational, and it also sort of speaks to, you know, another side of Black masculinity that's not always represented in traditional media.
Brian, what's been the reaction to this particular image in that? Because everybody walks past this.
Sure,
Yeah.
It's just past the entrance lobby of the museum, and even before the exhibition opened, people were stopping. Younger people were sitting on the floor starting to sketch this painting. They were stopping to take it in, and to give you a sense of the scale, it's more than 25 feet long and 12 feet tall. We had to build
wonderful.
a special wall just to hang it,
Yeah.
and had to put it on its stretcher in the museum because it doesn't fit in our door. It's a really remarkable canvas. And to jump off of what Rehema was saying about representation, if you walk upstairs to our galleries of old master paintings, you won't see Black bodies in heroic poses. You won't see Black men really anywhere in the galleries, and that's true of much of Western art history. And so I think one of the themes that this artwork exemplifies that runs through the exhibition is the politics of representation. Who is depicted in art, who is depicted in the media, who is depicted in other mass commercially available imagery,
and in
and
what
why.
ways.
Exactly.
Yeah,
In what
and
ways.
Exactly.
Okay. And in fact, pick up on that. There is just a striking photograph in this exhibit of a man whose head has got a branded Nike swoosh, and I'd like to bring that up.
Right.
And you know, you're talking about depiction, and this is, here we go.
Right.
This is a powerful image in this.
Right. The work is by Hank Willis Thomas. He is also a New York-based artist. And we have lots of New York-based artists in this show.
That's
and,
always been true.
I mean, Hank's work looks at advertising imagery and talks about the use of the image to sell products, but then takes it a step further and removes the ad's text and shows that something that seems really innocuous initially kind of has some sinister implications. And when you look at that work, you know, the Nike sign, you know, we all know what that means, just do it. Right. And that's probably what the text was, but we don't know what the text was. But instead we see this faceless person now.
This was not cropped. This
right,
is the way
no,
it really looks.
This is how it looked. And the person sort of becomes less human because you can't really see all the defining features of the individual's face. And it makes you begin to think about the branding that happened of slaves, you know, during a time period, dark time period in history.
A different kind of branding, a physical branding versus branding to sell shoes.
Exactly, a physical branding. And so then you start to think, well, how did this company think that this was appropriate? But then we all know, again, going back to Glenn Ligon even, that there's text that can help something seem a little bit more acceptable, and there's text that can make something seem a little bit less acceptable. Yeah. So
there's another piece in here that I find just fun that I wanted to include, and it's a sort of portfolio of wigs.
Okay.
If we can bring that up. And it is the sort of thing that I suspect a lot of white visitors may not quite understand what's going on here. Yeah. I'm not sure I understand what's going on here, but I just found it really fascinating.
Right. So this work is by Lorna Simpson, who is another New York-based artist. And the work sort of explores the connotations of hair. Hair politics within the African American community can be a little tenuous. Certainly there's certain practices. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but recently there's quite a big hullabaloo that happened with the, I think it was the United States Army that would not allow women of color to have braids in their hair. So politics of African American hair are really important because, traditionally there's so many different textures of hair that fall into African American women and men, and this sort of trying to straighten your hair is a really strenuous process. It's very Europeanized, to do such a thing.
There's two pieces I really want to get to, and that is the opening piece, which is entitled Klan Gate, and this is what you see against the windows as you walk into the gallery. And it's one that can take you by surprise because you don't necessarily see all the elements. Brian, what is this?
It is a gate, and it is positioned at the entrance to the exhibition and also in front of the windows that lead out into Eden Park. It's meant to imply a sort of introduction to the content of the exhibition as a whole, but also then the conversations and social questions that we're asking in the city at large. Gary Simmons took the typical figure of the African-American lawn jockey with its sort of outsized physiological characteristics, the sort of Sambo figure, and reversed the polarity of it. He's placed a Ku Klux Klan figure, or at least a figure wearing a hood and a robe that we associate historically with the Klan. And he made this work in 1992 at a time that we were in another presidential election year, and the politics of race were present on everyone's minds. It happened not long after the Rodney King beating and then the riots that took place in Los Angeles. And those questions that he was addressing 24 years ago by creating this symbol are still part of our conversation today.
And in fact, there is a special exhibit or gallery at the end of this, and when you go to this exhibit, and I encourage you to go, you might not see the signs, although there are signs. And I have stood in this gallery and watched people walk in. Let's take a look at this. It's entitled Duck Duck Noose, and it is one of the most effective pieces, powerful pieces I've ever seen. Rehema?
Yes, this is Duck Duck Noose. It's another work by Gary Simmons done in 1992. And the work sort of likens the sort of arbitrary selection of a lynching victim by the Ku Klux Klan to a game, a childhood game of Duck Duck Goose. And I think we're all familiar with how you play Duck Duck Goose.
And let's be clear, this is called Duck Duck Noose.
Yes, it's called Duck Duck Noose. And it sort of gives this childhood game, that is sort of fun, that's really fun, and when I think about when I played it as a child, it was a really happy, happy game. It gives something, it makes it the sort of actions really serious, takes those actions and they become really serious. I am
almost out of time. What's been the reaction to this?
We've had more than 30,000 visitors to the exhibition so far. Yeah. The number of comments that we've received, the feedback we received has been nearly universally positive, and we hope that more people come and continue the conversation.
And I want people to know how to do this. 30 Americans is open through the month of August, through August 28th. It is free. If you would like to learn a little more, check out the website at cincinnatiartmuseum.org. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
And thank you for your work. Stay tuned. After the break, the recently released report by the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance on the status of Greater Cincinnati's nearly 146,000 veterans living in the 16-county metro region. Welcome back. 2 years ago, Easter Seals undertook a needs and assessment review of all of the services in the region directed at the veteran community. That report found an adequate array of services for veterans and their families, but significant gaps between the services and veterans' awareness of those services. The principal recommendation of that report was to create an ongoing, regionally based veteran community alliance to coordinate, educate, and align the disparate veteran services. That recommendation was put in place and leadership identified. In addition, a Veterans In-Processing Center has been established at CityLink in the West End. 2 years later, the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance, the TVCA, has undertaken a second report to track the progress that has been made and to identify the path forward. To discuss the findings and recommendations of this new report, I am joined this morning by Dan Knowles, the President and CEO of the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance, and Pat Clifford, a consultant with his own firm who has been working with the local veterans community for 5 years and has been instrumental in the preparation of both reports. For in both cases, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Great, thank you.
And I think we talked about the initial report a couple years ago on this show. So, Dan, one of the goals here was to create collaboration, a better sort of network of collaboration among the various organizations in the community that were trying to serve the veterans community. What sort of progress have we made on that?
I think we've made very good progress on that. We work through a network of partners, of about 100 different partners throughout the community. And we work collaboratively with employers and people who support employment of veterans. We work with the educational institutions, particularly the 2- and 4-year community colleges, through the state institutions and private. And we also work with the Health and Wellness Collaborative, which is a very large sector of the group that is focused on veterans and their families.
So by creating this central organization, the TVCA, has that made it easier for these various organizations to at least know how to communicate with each other?
Absolutely. It was not. It's not an easy thing many times for groups to get together and sit across the table from what are essentially competitors or people they have to work with and cross-refer people to. And actually being able to put them in one place at the same time every month in each of our key sectors, education, employment, and health and wellness, allows us to not only share best practices, they get to know each other, they also get to adjust their services so that they can make it more efficient and provide better quality services to the veterans and their families.
Pat, there's there's a lot of really interesting data in this new report.
Yeah.
And I want to get at that a little bit, and particularly around the area of the demographic data. It really reveals a lot about, and we've got a full screen here that sort of clarifies or brings out what that is. So who is that veteran community? You can kind of see here, you say there's 145,870 veterans.
Right.
In what area? How big an area?
16 county general geographic region, MSA, I guess you would say. But about 30% of all of those veterans are in Hamilton County. And then an additional 55-60% are in the 5 outlying counties around Hamilton County. And
then also, I want to bring that back up. This is the demographics of this group. 88% are white. That surprised me a bit, to tell you the truth. 34% is the largest single group, and they're from the Vietnam era. Right. And 9.6 are from the post 9/11 period. And finally, 94% basically are male, and 6% are women. That didn't
when you look at the whole demographic picture, you're looking at all of the eras from all of the generations, and we in Hamilton County particularly, we're seeing kind of an aging of the veteran population and a huge bell curve that's kind of nesting around that Vietnam service era generation. We've been focusing a lot of our attention on that post 9/11 generation, and there's about 14,000 of those individuals. That's almost a 40% increase over 4 years ago. So while percentage-wise in the big picture, it may look a little swamped, it really is a huge increase in the last 4 years, and it's expected to grow.
Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to say, that you've got data in here not only indicating what exists today, but what's going to exist in the future. That's going to grow, but also the percentage of women is going to grow. Basically double, right?
And so we need to look at the diversity of our services and what is offered in terms of, are we reaching that post 9/11 demographic, the younger demographic? Are we being culturally competent in terms of how we're presenting our services, and in terms of not not every veteran is someone you see as your stereotype. We need to. We have a very diverse military, and our culture and our services need to reflect that.
Dan, for the younger veteran group, the post 9/11 group, what are the services they really need? Let's take somebody who's relatively recently come back from full-time service. What are the services that they really need?
Well, what you find is at a very basic level, they need to have a plan. And many people, when they leave the military, they just want to get out and they'll find their way. And there's some statistics that are out there that show that 80% of people, when they leave the military, don't have a job yet. They don't have a job lined up. They're going to figure it out when they get there. Homeless, they don't have a place to live, and some other things. And so one of the primary services that we can provide to them is to sit them down and say, what do you want to do? I mean, you have all these skills, you have this experience. How do you translate that experience, if you're looking for a job, for example, into something that an employer would be interested in? And how do we get that plan put together for you so that you can get a job before you try to go back and get your education, or get a car and a house and all that kind of thing?
Well, that translation part, because what people did while they were in the military, they probably know how to describe it in terms of what the military cares about, but how to describe it in terms of what a civilian employer cares about. I mean, it's a different set of competencies, right? Or it's the same competency, but you need to describe it very differently.
You do, and you've got to be comfortable with the language that's being used. You have to develop comfort with the process that many companies use, organizations use to hire people. And a lot of times veterans, you don't find, are very confident in describing that. The thing that's most interesting, because we do a lot of work with employers as well, and we always ask them, what are the things you most look for when you're trying to hire anyone? And they give you the list of all the things like personal accountability. I want them to be on time. I want them to, be loyal to us, et cetera.
The so-called soft skills.
Exactly. And veterans have those in spades, but they don't know that that's what's most valued. And so part of our job is to help them understand what the employers are looking for, build their confidence in being able to address questions that highlight those skills, and make sure the employers know how to ask questions that get veterans to answer.
Pat, what about the question, and Dan was talking, we've been talking about employment, but I know something that over your career you've been very engaged in is the question of housing.
Right.
And some people come back, they don't have housing lined up, they don't know what they're going to do about it. And this whole question of homeless veterans has been a concern. Where do we stand on that in this community, and are we making progress?
Well, there's been great progress in reducing veteran homelessness, and I think that has been an ongoing focus for our region for at least the last 5 or 6 years. And it's not about helping veterans who are homeless, it's about ending veteran homelessness. And so we've seen a 24% reduction in veteran homelessness over the last year in Hamilton County, and that continues to go down.
Because of coordinating services?
I think the coordinating services have a lot to do with it, and I think the veteran services and the partners that we work with are taking a cue from the homeless services in our community. How could we act as a unit? How do we share data effectively? How do we wrap services around an individual and focus on the customer rather than focus on our individual agency? So I think we've done well with that. I think the thing is, as that ends and as that wraps up, and as we really essentially kind of, for all intents and purposes, kind of wind down on that being a major issue, how do we translate those skills and those techniques to the broader issue of veterans transitioning into civilian life, or veterans trying to transition into a new career or a more productive career? And so going that next step.
I know I'm basically out of time, but there's one more question I just have to ask, and that is, what's the role of the Veterans Administration? How do you coordinate with the Veterans Administration? Because very honestly, this has become a huge political issue as well. And of course, Bob McDonald, a Cincinnatian, is the head of that. What's your relationship to the Veterans Administration?
Well, we actually have a very good relationship with the VA. Pat and I, as co-founders, we've worked with the VA over the years in many different capacities. And so it's been a challenge working with them. We're trying to help them to the extent we can. to address some of the issues that have been raised. You know, the VA has a huge number of very passionate, dedicated, talented people in that soft, gooey center, but it's surrounded by a very hard shell that doesn't let people in. And what we've been able to do is we know who the people inside are, and can many times try to get our veterans and the family members that we're working with to get to the right people much more quickly. And by doing that, help the VA see where perhaps the barriers and the blockages are and help them over that.
Well, thank you for all of this work and the work that you've been doing. And good luck in the future, and let's stay in touch, and let's keep talking about this, because this is the sort of not just happy talk about veterans, but doing something for people who have served the country. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women working to shape our region for the better future. Have a good week.